Hey folks, I'm JC from One Shot Adventures, and today I'm going to give you an overview of Thrusher Manor, a 17th century haunted house horror adventure. In Thrusher Manor, the players are sent to a lonely Caribbean island to collect taxes from a man who runs a den of hedonism. But soon they discover that his house is under the influence of dark magic and antediluvian secrets. Thrusher Manor is a free adventure of mine that you can download off of oneshotadventures.com, and it's available in versions for Call of Cthulhu, Old School Essentials / Old School D&D, and GURPS. But it's pretty easy to port to other systems. Thrusher Manor is my most popular adventure. It's been downloaded over 13,000 times over the years, and I've seen it played many times by groups all over the world. So if you're brave enough to enter Thrusher Manor, well, grab your lanterns and your crucifixes, because not only am I going to give you a full overview of this haunted house adventure, I'm going to give you GMs some tips and tricks on how to run this one like a pro. But be warned that there are spoilers ahead. So if you're interested in playing Thrusher Manor, back away from the door right now and send your favorite GM to check out this video instead. Here we go. Thrusher Manor is a 26-page adventure, and it can typically be completed in one session. But like a lot of investigative horror games, if your group is really into role-playing and exploration, it might take another session to complete. It comes with pre-generated characters, lots of handouts, and maps, so it's easy for GMs to run this one without a lot of extra prep. Before I jump into the overview of Thrusher Manor, I need to talk about what makes a great haunted house adventure. And that is the history of the house. Without an interesting, twisted backstory, haunted houses are just like small dungeons with bad layouts. Your players would go room to room, defeat any puzzles or monsters that they find, and eventually leave. But haunted houses in RPGs work best when they overlay a rich backstory of why the house is haunted into the adventure. So as the players explore and go room to room, they simultaneously unravel a horrifying mystery. And this elevates the entire game, taking it from a tactical room-by-room game to a much more immersive and creepy story. If your PCs discover a bleeding wall without context, it's just not interesting. But if the PCs know that the house was owned by a vampire who kept her victims in the ceiling, when they see that bleeding wall, that's terrifying and interesting. But let's go back to Thrusher Manor, and let's start with a history lesson. In the 1670s, Louis XIV was the King of France, and he lived in Versailles, where he was surrounded by his court, wealthy, ambitious aristocrats. But soon a scandal happened. The affair of the poisons, where nobles began accusing each other of poisonings. Well, Louis flipped out that poisonings were happening in his court, and this led to a huge investigation where over 400 people were implicated, dozens of people were tortured or executed or even burned at the stake for witchcraft. Now, all of that was real, but what happens next is fiction. Caught up in this scandal was Duke Montmorency and his sometimes lover, Madame de Scarrai. They were banished from France for their involvement and retreated to an island in the Caribbean, St. Médard. Here, Montmorency had already built a small getaway house, Thrusher Manor. The manor was architected by Montmorency's friend, the very famous Italian architect Borromini. And it was in a warm climate, and far away and within French territory, so it made perfect sense for Montmorency and Madame de Scarrai to hole up here and wait for this scandal to blow over. But soon, Montmorency's getaway house garnered a reputation. His friends would come visit and stay, and soon Thrusher Manor became known as a den of hedonism and sin. The house became famous for its constant over-the-top parties. His guests gambled and reveled in carnal activities and even dabbled in a little bit of petty black magic. Montmorency, however, kept a dark secret in this house. His friend and architect, Borromini, knew that Montmorency enjoyed a little bit of the dark arts here and there, so he built the manor on a cave that he discovered on the island. And way down deep in this cave were 4 fallen angels, chained to the rocks since the fall, unmoving and seemingly lifeless. One day, a drunk Montmorency decided to unchain one of those fallen angels, Margardiel. The demon was restored, and Montmorency invited him to stay at the manor, hoping to learn more dark magic from this creature. I mean, what could be cooler than having your very own demon to impress your guests? So soon Margardiel, or Count Murgod as he was called, joined the guests at the house. He claimed he was a foreigner who hailed from a distant land, and boy, he became popular. Count Murgod was funny and sexy and cunning and joyfully wicked and filled with vast knowledge. He also gleefully boasted about a pendant that he wore, which he said was his most treasured possession, but was actually stolen from one of the archangels that he fought during the fall. Count Murgod's popularity eventually grated on Montmorency. Like you'd expect with rich aristocrats, the guests and the others eventually grew jealous of this Count Murgod and just bored of how perfect and relentless he was. And so, during a card game of Primero one night, just as Count Murgod played a winning hand of Fluxus, Montmorency and his friends stabbed the Count, killed him, stole his pendant, and threw his body in the swamp. But Montmorency underestimated his opponent. A few days later, Murgod returned, angry and vengeful. He locked the guests in the manor with his dark magic, tortured them nightly, and said that there would be no escape for them until his pendant was found. Montmorency fled into the cave below the manor and took his own life, and the remaining guests began losing their grip on their sanity as Count Murgod tortured and killed them off one by one. And this is where the PCs enter. While all this was going on, France and Britain were going to war in the Caribbean. France desperately needed to build new warships and badly needed money to do it. And Montmorency, who was very rich, had not paid his taxes in quite some time. So the French governor in the area hires some trusted people, the PCs, to go to the island where Thrusher Manor is located and come back with Montmorency's owed taxes. So the PCs hitch a ride to this swampy island and find it utterly deserted. The small dock is empty, the path to the manor is overgrown, and there's a sense that something has gone wrong here. So soon, the PCs will enter the manor and find that there's a few guests remaining, and these guests are clearly terrified and desperate, and they have no idea where Montmorency is. So the beginning of this adventure plays like a slow burn. The PCs know that something is wrong with the remaining guests, and there's lots of opportunities here at the beginning for the PCs to roleplay, talk to the guests, find out a little bit more about the house, and earn their trust. But these guests are all selfish and jealous and desperate, so if the PCs rub them the wrong way or insult them or botch these introductions, the guests may turn on them later in the adventure in the hopes of winning the favor of Count Murgod by betraying these new guests that just walked into the manor. And chief among these guests is Madame de Scarai, that was Montmorency's lover, who did not participate in the assassination of Murgod, and so she'll be very quick to screw the players any chance she gets. We'll talk about her more later. Now, within an hour or so of arriving at the house, Count Murgod appears. The adventure gives the GM 2 different ways to do this. For more action-oriented groups, there's suddenly a violent crash of a chandelier in the dining hall and the discovery of a bloody dying servant, quickly followed by Count Murgod strutting into the room. Or you can go for a more slow burn classic horror approach where the guests invite the PCs to dinner that night and Count Murgod shows up very regally and where he questions the guests and is very polite and a little creepy before eventually losing his temper. Either way, Count Murgod ends up locking the PCs in the house with everybody else and says that they'll only be able to escape if they've found his pendant. With that, he seemingly vanishes in the house, promising to return later. The adventure now opens up into a sandbox investigation. The PCs have a goal, escape the house, and they have a reason to explore, finding Murgod's pendant. There are 3 floors to the house and about 25 rooms in total to explore. Each room will reveal a little bit more about the history of the house and its treacherous guests, and only a combination of exploration, role-playing with the survivors, and puzzle solving will eventually allow the PCs to escape. But let's talk about a few of the key rooms that the PCs can explore. In the cellar, the PCs discover that a massive abyss is forming at the bottom of the house, a chasm which seems to be pulling the house into hell itself. So this adds a timer into the adventure. If the PCs don't escape, within a day or so, they're going to die along with the rest of the house. This is also where Murgod's pendant is hidden, like deep down in that chasm where it was thrown by Montmorency before he tried to escape and eventually ended his own life. But the PCs don't actually need to find the pendant for this adventure to work, but it's there in this chasm for them to stumble upon. There's also a storeroom in the cellar where various torture devices are kept. And in a cage in the back of this room is held an invisible demon, this like imp known as Glacilobulos. Now every time I've run this adventure, at least one PC sees this locked, seemingly empty cage here and just decides to open the door and lets Glacilobulos go free, and this comes back to bite them later. You'll hear more about that in a second.
Ah, look, an empty cage in a torture chamber. Why don't we just smash open the lock and see what's inside?
The gaming parlor on the main floor is the site of Count Murgod's murder. Here, the PCs find a deck of Primero cards, kind of like an old form of poker, but it's missing 4 cards. The guests explain that Murgod had a winning hand, a fluxus, when he was brutally murdered by Montmorency, and these 4 cards still seem to be missing. Also on the main floor are various useful rooms like kitchens and libraries, things that the PCs can use to find hints and find maybe weapons and tools to help them later in the adventure. But let's talk about the top floor, where Madame de Scarai's chamber is always locked. But she has some really important clues in it, so the PCs will have to figure out a way to lure her away from her room before entering. Remember, she's the one that really is aligned with Count Murgod. She never murdered him, and she kind of likes his demonic ways, so she's really there to foil the PCs any chance she gets. In her room, amidst her various poisons, she has a letter from Montmorency, which details the existence of that cave underneath the house, where he hoped to escape Murgod. In his letter, Montmorency says that he left Madame de Scarai a key to the hidden closet which leads to the cave in a green vase in the library. Unfortunately, when the PCs go there, the key is not there, because the key has been eaten by Glacilobulos, that gold-loving imp that is invisible and chained up in the basement. So if the PCs have accidentally freed Glacilobulos, they now have to find an invisible demon somewhere in the house, capture him, and yank the key out from his insides.
Oh, the key is in its belly. Oh well.
Back on the main floor in the hearth room is a Boca de Veritas with the keyhole in it. And with that key that they find, the PCs can find the secret staircase that leads down into the Black Observatory, the cave where Count Murgod was once chained along with 3 other fallen angels. Here the PCs will find Montmorency's corpse, along with Murgod's true angelic name, Margardio. Eventually the PCs will figure out that Count Murgod is a demon, a fallen angel, and they can try confronting him at various times during the adventure, but he's very powerful and is fully protected by this demonic aura. But once they realize what he is, the characters can figure out that with an exorcism, they can actually strip away those demonic powers that he has and make him vulnerable to ordinary sources of damage, like weapons or guns. However, for an exorcism to work, the PCs need a few key things. First, the demon's blood must be completely removed from the house. Any lingering presence of Count Murgod is going to cause the exorcism to fail. Second, the ritual works best if the PCs know the demon's true name. And third, the demon must be physically present during the ritual. Once the PCs understand these 3 rules, they have work to do. First, they must find the 4 blood-stained Primero cards that Murgod held when he was stabbed by Montmorency. They're coated in his blood, and thus they need to be destroyed for the exorcism to work. They're scattered around, hidden in the house, including one tossed into the toilet with a snake at the bottom, which is always a nasty surprise for one of the PCs.
My friends, I think I see the card. I'll just reach in and get it.
Next, the PCs need to find Count Murgod's true name, Margardio, and this is written where he was chained up in the Black Observatory underneath the house. But there's also a few other ways they can find it by finding some artifacts and notes in the house. Finally, the PCs have to summon Murgod and confront him directly. This is pretty easy as he kind of shows up whenever there's something disturbing or violent going on in the house, like bloodshed. And don't forget, while the PCs are running around the house looking for bloody Primero cards and Murgod's true name, they have to maintain their sanity because there's a lot of occult dangers happening in the house. Some rooms are filled with carnivorous moths, and Count Murgod himself can kind of act like a ghost and create bad things in the house, like possessing people for a few moments or poltergeisting furniture around. And Madame de Scarai, who, if you remember, is an ally of Murgod, well, she keeps letting these like infernal crocodiles into the house, and she might try poisoning the PCs whenever she can. Oh, and in an extra twist, Count Murgod has turned Madame de Scarai into sort of this undead revenant. So if the PCs ever truly anger her, she makes for a really scary and deadly combat opponent. The finale of the adventure happens when the PCs decide they have enough knowledge and enough strength to confront Murgod and perform that exorcism. Of course, Count Murgod won't just stand around when this happens, so the adventure typically ends in a grand sword fight with some of the PCs trying to keep Count Murgod at bay, while the poor soul performing the ritual and the exorcism completes it, and the NPCs, the other guests who the PCs have either befriended at this point or are really irritated, have to make a call of whether they save the Count to earn his favor or help the PCs in this final battle. All the role-playing that's happened as the PCs have explored the house kind of pays off in this final confrontation. And that's the conclusion of Thrusher Manor. Now, obviously, I've run this adventure many times myself for different groups, and I've also seen it run at conventions by other GMs. So I've gathered a few tips for anybody interested in running Thrusher Manor. First, because this is an investigative horror adventure, get familiar with the history of the house. Get to know some of those guests pretty well, because usually the PCs will attach to 1 or 2 of those guests and really try to make them their allies. And so learn those guests' motivations and behavior so the role-playing kind of flows, and when you get to that final fight and that guest needs to make a call whether to help the PCs or help Count Murgod, that it'll feel natural and well established what that guest does at that moment. Second, encourage the players to explore the entire house. There are a lot of clues hidden in Thrusher Manor, and while there are redundant clues, the PCs don't have to find everything for this adventure to work. If the PCs don't venture up and down the house, they might still miss something. So use the NPCs to encourage the players' curiosity. Somebody could say, oh, nobody's ever allowed in Madame de Scarai's room since that incident. Who knows what she keeps in there? Or they could say, oh, Duke Montmorency always kept his most precious valuables locked up in his closet. We've never seen it. Just anything you can do to get them to move around the house and search around is just going to make the adventure just run faster and that much better. Next, use Count Murgod's more ghost-like powers to ramp up the tension and remind the PCs that he doesn't like them there and he needs them to find his pendant. He can possess guests, so have them do that for a minute or 2 to threaten the PCs and remind them that they're on a mission for him, or even fling a vase or a bookshelf at them if they're kind of snooping around in an area they shouldn't be. Just wear down your PCs with his presence. He only shows up physically maybe 2 or 3 times in this adventure, but you should always use his powers to remind the PCs that he's watching them very closely. Absolutely key to Thrusher Manor having a really good finale is knowing when to give the PCs the hint that an exorcism is what they need to do to kind of take away Count Murgod's demonic protections and make him vulnerable. I usually handle this that when a religious character starts to believe that the Count is supernatural or demonic, that I just kind of automatically tell them that they know the rules to how exorcisms work. And then I give them that handout that's included that kind of spells out those rules. Or you could have an NPC just like moan that, oh, he wishes a priest was here to exorcise the house. And that at that point, I let the PCs all make idea rolls or intelligence rolls, whatever system you're using, to kind of recall how exorcisms need to work. Finally, I know a lot of you GMs like to run horror one-shots in October, so if you need this adventure to fit into one session, just skip the whole voyage to the island at the beginning, start with the PCs staring at the door of Thrusher Manor, and just narrate the backstory about how the French governor sent them there because he desperately needs Duke Montmorency's taxes. The adventure still works great, and this cuts about 30 to 45 minutes off the runtime or more if your PCs are really into role-playing pirate swashbuckling types. You know who you are. Well, I hope this video overview was helpful and inspires you GMs and helps you run Thrusher Manor that much better. And if you end up playing in or running Thrusher Manor, I'd love to know how it went. Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to see what kind of crazy shenanigans your players got up to. And if you enjoyed this video and want to see more video overviews and RPG reviews, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. Until next time, I'm JC, and just remember, if you find a naked demon chained up in your basement, just put a blanket over him and leave him be.